Hi everyone, the next type of text or genre we're looking at is fantasy. This is another really popular genre of books and movies and lots of things that many people enjoy. What is fantasy? An imaginative story that is entirely made up. Fantasy stories have events that could not occur in real life. A big thing we'll talk about is many fantasy stories have magic in them. The main characteristics of fantasy are first, unrealistic characters. For example, if there are talking animals, that is not possible in real life, unfortunately. So that tells you the book is fantasy. Or, like I said, if the characters have magical powers, then you know it's fantasy. The other main characteristic of fantasy is unrealistic events happen throughout the story. For example, a magic carpet ride, or if there's any time travel, that cannot occur in real life, so that makes it fantasy. Why do authors write fantasy? Authors write fantasy to entertain their reader. They can be creative and come up with a silly or crazy story that will keep the reader engaged in reading. Many authors and many of you really like to write creative stories to get all those silly, crazy ideas you have out of you, and a great way to do that is with your writing. You're probably thinking of some examples of fantasy. There are 4 listed here. The first is The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This book series has been made into a movie and follows some siblings who enter a magical world. There's talking animals, lots of fantasy elements. The next example is one of my favorites of all time, Harry Potter, written by J.K. Rowling. This book series was also made into a movie. Harry finds out he is a wizard and has lots of magical adventures throughout the novels, making it a great example of fantasy. Next up is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, written by Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl is an author who is famous for the fantasy he writes. A lot of his stories have really crazy, funny, magical things that happen. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was made into a movie. I'm trying to think of some other examples. The BFG was written by Roald Dahl, and Matilda, and more I can't think of right now. Lots of fantasy. And the last example is Inkheart. This one says Ink Spell. I think they're part of the same series. This book's on my to-be-read list. I know I like fantasy books. I've heard good things about this series and just never got around to reading it. So what other books can you think of that are great examples of fantasy? They probably have magic in them, and they definitely have things that could not occur in real life.